What's up, everybody? This is Don Ward with Third Creative, thirdcreative.com, and welcome to the walkthrough tutorial video for In the Dust. In the Dust is the newest template to hit thirdcreative.com. It is an outdoor multi-sport template, and it comes with everything you see here: 6 files, your panoramics, your verticals, your horizontals, horizontal memory mate. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the steps of customizing this template, show you all the options, the ins and the outs, some things that maybe you already would know, and maybe some things that you might not know. Ultimately, the goal is for you to be able to get the most out of this template. And let's not waste any time. Let's jump right in. We're going to start off taking a look at our horizontal 2x3. I think I would like to strip down most of these layers. I usually just strip it down to the background and work our way up and explain everything. So I think that's what we'll go ahead and do. Maybe I'll leave this light on. So let's look in this very bottom folder. We have our background folder. So we'll open that up and take a look. Very first layer is background. You can edit this color, but most of our color customization is going to come from this gradient color option or this solid color option below it. Here we have our sky option. I have a gradient mask that blends it from the background into the sky. So you have a transition there. And if you want more contrast or less contrast with the sky, you can open this levels adjustment up and play with that a little. But really, pretty much what you're going to do when you come into this background folder is look to change the colors. So we'll talk about the few options. Let's turn this gradient off. If you want just desaturated, black and white, just turn this gradient off and you are desaturated. If you want it lighter or darker, we have the solid color option. It is set to soft light. If we double click here, we can come down to get darker and all the way up to get lighter. If you want any lighter than that, you will need to actually come down and play with the levels adjustments to make it a little lighter and then also lighten up this background. But pretty much we can do everything we need to right here as far as this background color is concerned with these 2 layers. So if you want a solid color, you can open this picker box and you can go with a color. Use your slider and play around with it until you get what you're looking for. If you want to use a gradient like I did here, and as you'll see later, I've got some dirt, powder, brush effects that give the appearance of dirt down here, and so that's why I went with this gradient option, also set to soft light. You can open it up, click in here. If you have gradients already that you want to use, you can do that, but otherwise we'll start off with the sky and we'll just we'll come up with a scenario. Maybe this looks too midday. It's a little too bright. Maybe you want it to be darker. So we can actually go here and then to our color box, and we can come down with the color, make it a lot darker, more saturated, less saturated. Maybe you want more of a purplish tint to the sky. You can use this slider to come up. So let's say maybe this is what we're looking for. So we'll hit OK, and then we can come over here if we want to. Well, I didn't mean to do that. If we want to change the color of the dirt, we can click right here on this left-hand square and click in the color box. Maybe we want it to be a little darker, a little less saturated. Kind of play around with it. Or maybe if for some reason you want the bottom to be red. Unlimited options if it works. But that's pretty much it. Let's back out of that. So that's how we're controlling the color of the general background. There is a vignette layer that you can turn off, and you see it will brighten the corners and the edges, and this kind of draws you into your subject. Let's close that up. Let's take a look at our light folder. If you open this up, really if you want to do anything with this, for the most part you're just going to select this whole thing, and maybe you want to scale it down, maybe you want to move it around. Pretty much everything you would do is just by selecting this, because everything else is just layers to give the appearance of the light being on, which you can turn on and off. I've got an exposure adjustment that makes it look a little darker further down the light pole. I've got the actual light pole itself, which has a gradient mask to fade it out, so maybe you want that to fade out a little bit higher. If you select your mask, use the black to white. I think it'll work like this. I hold down shift just to get a straight line. Maybe you want to adjust that, you can. We'll go back to how it was. If for some reason you want an additional light, rather than dragging from another template, you can, on a Mac I hold down Option and just click and drag up, but you can right click and duplicate layer. That doubles it up, and because the cast from the light is coming from left to right, I would take it a step further. With that new light layer, I would come up to Edit, Transform, and Flip Horizontal. Now with our Move tool, I hold down Shift, click on here, drag it over. You can arrange these however you want. But I got to thinking some of you might really get into this and want more than just one light. So that's how I would go about it. The next folder we have here is our stripes. So I've got some vignetting. Give it a little dimension. It's darker in the corners, a little lighter in the center. But if we open it up, it's basically labeled stripe 1 through stripe 6. Down here at the bottom, stripe 6, I have the opacity at 20. It's just a white stripe with the opacity at 20 so that you can see some of the background through. Any of these stripes, if you want to change the colors, you can just click in this little square box, as you see here. So I will double click. Maybe we won't use that one as an example. Let's use this top one, this orange one. So maybe our team is red, so we want to go with the red. You can go darker, more saturated, less saturated. You get the idea. And that's how you change the color on any of these stripes. So this stripe 2 will be this white area just outside of the orange. You can turn that off and see that it'll go away. Stripe 3, it'll be this black area. So by changing the color of any of these lower stripes, it's going to affect both sides. And you get the idea. So you can come in here and adjust the colors how you want them. I do have on this one an inner glow, which is, I'm using the color black, but it just kind of puts this little shadow effect here, and then I have a pattern overlay. You can actually turn that off if you don't like it, or use a different pattern, but it's a jersey material. That's pretty much all there is to the stripes. So keeping it moving. Next layer up, we have a grunge layer, which is optional. It is set to soft light with I think 50% opacity. So you can, if you really want to have a stronger effect, you can boost that up. If you want it lower, you can bring it down even lower. By default, it's set at 50. Upper text layers. Let's turn that on and take a look at these layers. Alright, so if we open it up, I like to throw in different font options. Maybe you want to use different font that comes in here. Maybe you like some of the fonts I use, but They may require a commercial license for some of them, which for this example, this requires a commercial license. But I've built in some others that do not. Fonts, I mean, I pick fonts for a template that I think work, but you can use any font of your choice. So starting off, these first 3 fonts are for this, what I call team name. It can be mascot name, it can be anything, but where we have Bulldog here. It is set up where you can change the color. If you double click in the T, you can use this picker box. If you have your character panel, you can use this picker box. There is a stroke outline, so if you double click right here on stroke, you can change the color of the stroke to anything that you want. I have some built-in inner shadows and drop shadows to give the depth, the appearance of depth. And the same thing I have on these other fonts. So, this font here, this first one was Manzine. And then we have Mickey Stewart, which is free for commercial use. And then we have Airstream. I thought this one looked kind of cool too. But they're all set up the same way. Change the color and the stroke outline the same way. Let's keep looking here. Okay, if we come down here, ball seams. It says ball seams left. So we have the seams on the left. Oops, didn't mean to do that. Have these seams on the left side. We have these seams on the right side. It says adjust because you might change this to say something else. You might scale it up, scale it down, and these may not fit just right. So you can pick one, use your move tool, and you can move it around however you want it. And once you do, you can commit it. Something that's pretty important, I doubt many of you are going to want this orangish tint to your ball seams. I use that because team's colors are orange. So if you want to change them to red, we'll just double click on this hue saturation, and you'll just kind of have to move it a little bit until you see the color of red. Actually, you can move it back to 0. That's probably the original state. 0 plus 1, somewhere in there. And if for any reason you want some other color, just keep sliding until you get the color that you like. But if you want red ball seams, this is how you do it. You can move those around, resize, reposition, however you want. They are set to darken blend mode, and they have a levels adjustment, and this is how I was able to get, let me see, if I turn that levels adjustment off, you can start to see this edge here. So we wanted to get rid of that, so I turned the levels adjustment and boosted the whites. I put it on darken blend mode, and that way it'll show, or it won't show anything other than these ball seams. If you come down here, they're clipped to the sport name option 1, which is, let's see here, you can change the color. Let's say you wanted it the actual color of maybe like a softball, so you can go with this yellow. This is how you control the color, the internal color here. It has 2-stroke options, so if you double click here and open this up, you have 2 strokes. They are set to gradient. If you don't want to use gradients, just come to this window, change to a solid color. You're good. And you can set it to any solid color. If you like the gradient option, then you keep it here and just double click, or actually click in here, and you can pick your colors. Real simple. What else we have? We have some drop shadows that you probably won't need to mess with. Let's say you're doing a sport that's not baseball or softball and you don't want ball seams. You can just turn those off. Let's say you want to use this other text option. You could either just change this font up here, or you can turn this off, turn this one on. This is a different font option that I have in here. you can actually highlight these two ball seams, drag them down, and while holding Option, I kind of hover between these two layers and it will clip them to this font Option. So that's how you can apply the ball seams to the sport name Option 2. It's set up the same way. You can turn on gradient overlay if you want to have a gradient inside, but if you don't, otherwise you'll just use the color picker to pick your color there. Pretty simple, straightforward. So our next folder we have here is where you drop your subject to image. I have a gradient mask that kind of fades this little corner. Now you can see this little stripe through here, so you can adjust that if you want to. You can turn it off if you don't like that, but it kind of gives the appearance of some of this dirt and dust. Now something to keep in mind is this foreground dirt will be over it, and so that'll kind of help fade or blend that. But I hold down Shift and click on this mask, it turns it off. You click in there with Shift and turn it back on. You can use your black to white gradient tool and adjust it however you want. Obviously that's too much, but you get the idea. This is where you place your subject, scale, size them. Very simple, very straightforward. This is a darken lower legs option. You can turn this off. This is just an exposure adjustment with a gradient mask, so it only applies here. So if you turn that off, it just kind of brightens his legs. I used a levels adjustment on my subject image, and I kind of boosted the whites, made his pants really bright. I thought it was distracting, so I usually put this in my templates as an option if you want to just kind of have more of a light fall off look, but do it artificially. Next we have our foreground dirt, and it's full of powder brush strokes. Now you can really get in depth with these as they're all set to different opacities. I kind of tweak them to my liking. You can change each color individually, but most of you will just want to leave this closed and go with this color overlay. If you double click on the color overlay, click in this box, you can tweak it to whatever you want. That looks atrocious. Next we have our foreground stripes. Let's turn that on and let's open it up. Really simple, 2 stripe options. So for these stripes, we will not click in the little box because it'll actually open up as a smart object. Instead, we're going to use this color overlay option right here. If you just double click, you can change it to any color that you need, and the same thing for this substripe. I do have a little bit of a drop shadow. As you can see, I've added it here, just provide some depth. I also have some vignetting, kind of darkens it around the edges, and you can turn that off and see how that looks. You can open this up and make it darker. You can make it lighter. Let's see, very last we have our player name. This one, everything's pretty simple, but this one, if you do automation, you might end up taking some of these things out and just doing a solid color, because it's this whole line here is text layers. And so if we click in here, go to our character panel, it's all the same font, but if you want to change the first name, you want to double click here to get everything highlighted, use your cursor, click and drag to highlight just the name. Let's change his name to David. Let's put our space in there. Now if we want to change the color, we need to highlight David, come up to this color box or up here, either or, pick your color, and that's how you control the first name. And with the last name, you'll want to highlight And let's say his last name is Smith. Same thing, type it in, now you can highlight it, and if you want to change the color, you can do that. Same thing applies for these backslashes. You highlight them, come up here, and you can change the color. Now they're separated, so if you did change the color to something lighter, you want to right click on this color code, copy it, and that way when you come over here and come up to the color picker, you can just paste it in and match it perfectly. So I like this effect because I like a different color for the first name and the last name. I like these backslashes, but I do know that that's not ideal for using any type of automation. I don't know, some of you wizards out there might be able to figure something out. So if you are using automation, want to simplify it, just take the backslashes out and just make the name all one color, and you'll be good to go. Below it I have senior, junior, sophomore, and freshman options, and they're already set up. If you want to change the colors, it's the same exact thing. Double click in here and highlight the portion that you want to change the color to. If you want to change the text altogether, have at it. You've got all the options you need there. And that is the vertical. Tried to fly through that one. Mostly everything that we talked about is going to apply to the horizontals, but let's jump over to a horizontal, and I'm just going to talk to you about a few things that are different and or that don't apply to this vertical version, and then we'll also do a quick run through on how to do the memory mate, and we'll wrap it up. So let's jump over to the horizontal now. All right, so now we're looking at one of the horizontal files. This is the 4x5. I'm going to use this one because it correlates with the 4x5 memory mate that we're going to talk about last. But let's just kind of look at some of the things that are different. First thing, very top layer, we have this lower text layer. So this is where we have varsity, we have our slash, and 2021. So the same thing as we were talking about with the individual. You want to select the whole thing and then use your cursor to select just the part that you want to change. So if you want that to say junior varsity, or whatever that you want it to say, you can change it, and then you can highlight that again and select the color that you want, and just highlight and select the part that you want to change, highlight and select the part that you want to change the color, and that's how you'll manage that. So let's look at what else is. The background is pretty much set up the same. There is some powder behind the players that you can play with the color, but it's already set to grayscale, so it'll work just fine if you just use these two color options to change your color, just like the individual. Lights, you already have two in here, everything else is the same. The stripe is set up the same, it's just not diagonal. We have our grunge layer, that's the same. So here's where it starts to get a little bit different. We have our top row, and it is below the middle text layers, and that's how we get them the depth here. So we have our bottom row first up here. We have our middle text layers here, and then we have our top row. All right, so let's talk about this. We'll start with the bottom row. This bottom row, I have a gradient mask, and so if we turn off this lower foreground dirt, we'll be able to see it a little bit better. I have a gradient mask in here, and it is straight across. So if I turn that off, you can see I actually had some gradient on these corner players. So basically what I want to explain is that by having this on, it kind of will fade it straight across the bottom. Now once you do that, well, I say once you do that, it's already there. You can adjust that if you want it to fade out higher or at a different point. by selecting the black to white gradient mask. We've talked about it a few times. You can play around with that. I hold down Shift, get a straight line. Now let's say you want to fine tune it. Once you have it, you can go to your brush and make sure it's on the soft brush option, and hardness is at 0, and we'll use my bracket key to make it bigger. Low opacity, and you can kind of just fine tune it however you want. You get the idea. We have another darken lower legs, which is optional. You turn it on, turn it off. You can adjust it by clicking in here and playing with this exposure slider. So you're going to drop your subject images in here, arrange them how you want them. There is a drop shadow that you can turn on or off. It provides a little more depth. You can open it up to adjust the distance, opacity, size, fine tune it for your image. This is what works for this image. Let's see, then we have our middle text, and everything else is just as it was with the vertical that we talked about. Then we have our top row. So with this top row, if I turn off this text, I have it set where, and we can zoom in and kind of see where it'll fade out right here. So it kind of looks like they're behind this stripe. Same thing, you can use this to change this. You can do whatever you want. I don't like seeing that through their legs, and that's why I chose to just do it right there, just a small one. Oops, Shift didn't work. Yeah, something like that. We do just a little one. But that can be adjusted if you need to. Let's turn the text layers back on. Text layers have that drop shadow, so it's going to cover up a lot of that. And let's talk about this lower foreground dirt. Now, I've got it split into 3 different folders. I've got a light and a dark dirt, and then I've got a dark grunge. Oops. So we can turn off the light dirt. It basically provides a little bit of depth, little highlights. So this bottom one is a grunge, and you can click on color overlay and make that as light or dark or whatever color you want. I have it all the way to black. Again, you can open these up and control them individually if you want to get that detailed. This is a darker dirt or powder or dust. So the same thing, you can open up and control them individually, or you can just use this color overlay and pick the color that you want. Obviously that looks terrible. Same thing with the light dirt. Or you also have the option, this says Desaturate Dirt. So for example, if we wanted a black and white background where we turn this off, and alright, so now we have black and white, but now we have color on this foreground dirt. So we can turn this, if we scroll up, we can turn this Desaturate Dirt adjustment layer on, and it's going to just desaturate it all. Another scenario or example is, let's say you went with a reddish color as the background. Well, then you would need to make this foreground match. And so it's set to colorize. You just turn the saturation up to your liking and adjust the color slider, and you can make it lighter or darker, but you'll already have your background set to the color that you want, and you just adjust this way to match the color and to make it all work, make it all blend. So that's the differences or the additional things that apply to the horizontal version. Very last thing, let's talk about that memory mate. If you've done some of my other more recent templates, it's the same thing that I've been doing. But if you're going to do your memory mate, you're going to use this team image to drop into it. So you would simply save this as a JPEG, and let's just change the number or the name just a little bit. Now you can put whatever quality you want. I'm just going to leave it at 6 just for this demonstration. Alright, so we've saved our team image as a JPEG. We'll go ahead and get out of this. Now we're going to open our memory mate. So the memory mate option, if you don't want to use the other 4x5 horizontal to build it, you'll go in and adjust your background. You can copy the same gradient or the color picker tool code that you used for the background. You can do the same with your stripes and your text, but once you have all of that adjusted, you'll want to come down to this folder right here that says place team image in this folder, and we'll just delete this sample one. And even though we're going to put the same one in there, you'll get the idea. Now I gotta go and find it. And the JPEG, there we go. So all we're going to do is drag and drop. And let's hit the check mark now. I'm going to make sure it's in the folder it needs to be in. There we go. So now with our move tool, click the corner, scale it down to the size that you want, and position it how you want. I'm not going to play with it too much because you get the idea. Once you've done that, it has a built-in stroke outline. If you want to change the color, just click on stroke. It is set to gradient. You can change the gradient, or you can change to a solid color. Pick a color from your screen, whatever you want to do there. And it's got a drop shadow built in. And that is it. All right, so we just raced through all of that stuff, but there was a lot to cover. Probably for most of you, a lot of basics that you already know, but I want to cover everything for everybody. So hopefully that helps. That's all I've got. If you got any questions, shoot them to me, don@thirdcreative.com, or you can hit me up on the Facebook. But again, that's it. I appreciate you guys. For those of you who picked this up, or any of them up, thank you very much. I hope it makes you tons of cash. And until next time, see ya.